not quite sure it's her or Pepsi, but you know, I saw it one day. Sometimes Pepsi's my best girl, sometimes.
The children have a lot of exposure to people that normally they wouldn't, and also he's taken us on many trips that normally we would not have been able to go on. And not only that, just in his world. I mean, I always say that we orbit in the Clark orbit. we do. You know, this house always just moves, and if you're in this house, you're definitely in the Clark orbit.
He's all the time is coughing, you know. And then I took to England to find out what it is. Then the doctors said that he was suffering from Lou Gehrig disease. And then I immediately decided to take him to United States, to Johns Hopkins. We were waiting for the doctor to come with the result. And when the doctor mentioned that he's not suffering from Lou Gehrig disease, it's only a post-polio syndrome, Arthur was very, very happy, you know. We all was very happy. And we don't know how happy we were. You can't imagine, you know. To a man who told about 2 years he's going to finish his life, and here he come and says nonsense, you know.
Come on, Pepsi. Come on, little Pepsi. Come on. Come on, let's go sit down. There you are. All right, Pepsi. All right, Pepsi. Isn't it? It's a big, big, strange world, isn't it? There. Look at that. It's hugging the camera. That should be really nice. Look at that. When people ask me this question, often the quick answer I give is, why do you live in Sri Lanka? I answer, 30 British winters. The Ramans deliberately created it to deal with equally nasty creatures. On guard. To deal with equally nasty creatures. On guard. Okay, Miss Makeup.
This is not my forte, but I'll learn. That's it. It's all stuff you learn.
Okay, I wonder which is Amy. Exactly which one.
It is 9 feet tall, and it's right here next to you.
Yeah. Okay. Do I look scared or am I intrigued?
No, you look like you would look like
A wonderful creature, this avian. The anything it considers to be trash. Nothing remains on the ground in plain sight for very long. Crab biop of anything it considers to be trash. Nothing remains on the ground in plain sight for very long. Well, you see, I ended Rendezvous with Rama with the phrase, the Ramans do everything in threes. Now, a lot of people thought that I was heading for a sequel then, but for years I said, no, I just felt that was the right way to end the book. I will never write a sequel to Rendezvous with Rama. But then, when this guy came along, he had one or two ideas about engineering and so forth, you know. I realized, yes, if I want to develop this further, and after all, if the Ramas do everything in threes, there may be two more coming, or maybe one's already come. Anyway, the possibilities are there, and so let's look into it. And one thing led to another, and another, and another.
Right.
I got a letter from my agent saying that there was someone who had some idea for a science fiction story, and he wanted to work with me. Well, I said, no way, I have too many ideas of my own. And then he said that he was involved with the Galileo project, the space probe to Jupiter. And of course, I've been very interested in Jupiter because Jupiter was the scene of much of the action in the Odyssey series. And so I said, oh yes, then I'd like to see this fellow. And so he said, okay, so, at least it won't do any harm to talk to him. I might get some good ideas from him.
The most important thing that I have learned from Arthur is the precision of the English language. I tend to be verbose and to use 5 words where 2 or 3 will do. And there's some that will argue that all I've done is figure out how to only use 4, and I'm still too verbose. But it's been a great experience for me to watch the felicity he has with the English language.
Yes, I'm not quite sure how I do feel. In fact, one of the criticisms of this kind of interactive adventure is that, well, it's not what the original author created. I mean, would you like Hamlet with a happy ending, Well, maybe it'll be interesting at least. But what I hope this sort of thing will do will educate people. It'll make them realize, in the case of the Rama series, the scope of the universe, the fact that we are probably not alone. It will teach them and stretch their minds. And that's why I like this particular development. I'm very much against the violent stuff. And, another Martian bit the dust kind of thing. At least anything that gets clobbered in our adventure, it deserves to be clobbered.
In the past, it hasn't. But now that I have been through this extraordinary experience of trying to blend a story and gameplay, which is what we're trying to do in Rama, neither one ascendant. Good gameplay, good story, wrapped together in a literary form. I now think that most of my novels in the future will be shaped by the fact that there is another medium that may reach more people. Again, what Arthur said earlier, the good feature of having science fiction done on a computer is that there will be many more people who will know the story than there might be if we just were limited to the single medium of writing books.
I said, what is that? Remember, I haven't seen any of these new multimedia, whatever you like to call them, with a very few exceptions, and I really had no idea of what was involved, and I'm extremely impressed now with what I have seen. I don't think I ever imagined I would become a professional author. I wrote entirely for fun in a school magazine in my late teens, and later on amateur science fiction magazines, made a few dollars here and there. And then I got a job very good job in the Institution of Electrical Engineers editing science abstracts and getting all the world's scientific magazines to abstract. But I was still writing, you know, in my spare time. And what happened was that my salary at the Institute of Electrical Engineers went like that. My salary or my income as a science fiction writer went up like that, and at the crossover point I just resigned. And it was no hassle, no problems. I published a number of novels, Sands of Mars, Predator to Space, from a small press, Gnome Press. But I think the first real success was certainly with Childhood's End, when Ballantine took it, and it got very good reviews, including the New York Times. And so that was my first commercial and indeed a critical success outside the science fiction ghetto. Well, science fiction is an extrapolation, usually, of known science, or at least plausible science. And incidentally, science fiction does not, as many people think, try to predict the future, but it does try to predict perhaps the technological future, you know, what might be possible if certain scientific fields are developed further, or maybe if new branches of science are discovered. Well, if I was about 50 years younger, I think I probably would.
Well, it's absolutely clear what I would do. I like the avians, but very quickly I would determine that they were not more advanced than the human species. The octospiders would fascinate me. I would see the colors streaming around their heads. I would want to speak to them in their language. I would want to understand where they came from, how they evolved, what their past history was, what their goals were, what their values were. And all of that would be where I would go. So if I were to be on board, the commander of the crew would have a hard time keeping me from finding out what that was all about.
Well, there's so much to look for. You really aren't looking, you're just discovering new wonders. You're not looking for anything specific, because everywhere there's something new that you've never even thought of. I'm sure we'll be going back to the moon with much better and safer and more economical spacecraft early in the next century. But the real action is going to be on Mars, maybe 2020 or there onwards. As space travel becomes easier and safer and cheaper, we will inevitably go out to the planets. But we have to wait for improvements in technology. And when they come along, whether the will is there or not, we'll go. But we've just quite recently had another very good reason for going into space. The whole world watched when Jupiter was clobbered by Shoemaker-Levy. Now we know this happened in the past. It's happened many times in the history of our Earth. 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs were probably made extinct, or they may be on the way out anyway, but that impact 65 million years ago finished off the dinosaurs. And as my friend Larry Niven once said, the reason why the dinosaurs became extinct was because they didn't have a space program. Well, I'm afraid it's a little too late now. I don't even like going in airplanes anymore, I'm afraid. But I guess it's going to take a long time to get to Mars. 6 or 8 months on the minimum orbit, isn't it?
Right.
So no, I'm afraid I couldn't face that sort of thing. But if a flying saucer landed and said, "I'll take you to Alpha Centauri," that's another thing. But I think most people agree with me in saying it seems incredible that in this gigantic universe, we are the only life form or the only intelligence. I would bet almost anything that there's lots of intelligence out there, and one day we may contact it or it may contact us. I think it's quite possible that there may have been visitors here on Earth in the remote past. Unfortunately, nonsensical books and fraudulent books by people I won't mention because the lawyers might be on me, have made it difficult for serious scientists and researchers to look into this. Let me make one thing perfectly clear. I don't believe there's been any contact with extraterrestrials in the last few hundred years. We have to go back much further than that. But it may be tomorrow. I'm quite prepared to think I think that's perfectly possible. But it's more likely to be in 10, 100 years. Recently, I had the privilege of talking to one Mr. Turner and one Mr. Murdoch, not simultaneously, but I raised this point. I mentioned that our television programs now occupy a sphere maybe 100 light years across, and many civilizations may therefore know about us, about our atrocities, our wars, our crimes, real, fictional, and real, which it might be very difficult for an alien intelligence to distinguish. I deduce from that there aren't any higher civilizations within, say, 50 light years of Earth, because if there were, the cops would be here already with their sirens screaming right across the radio spectrum. Great unknown question is, are we closer to apes or angels in the hierarchy of the universe? Indeed, are there any angels or their equivalent out there in space? I hope that I'll see an answer to this question in my lifetime, though it may take, nobody knows. They may arrive, or we may discover their existence tomorrow. It may take 1,000 years. Although I'm often called the father of satellite communications, I prefer to be called the godfather. The real fathers are the engineers who put their careers online and made it all happen. The communications revolution, of which satellites were only one part, has changed human society out of all recognition. And perhaps the most important thing it's done is create an era of transparency. Although there are still some exceptions, it's no longer possible to hide what is going on anywhere. We're all living in glass houses, and this, I think, is a very good thing. It began during the closing months of the war, when we space cadets of the British Interplanetary Society, and a society which was formed in 1933 to try to go to the moon, it had been in suspended animation during the war, and we were looking around for ways in which rockets might be useful instead of being employed to blow people up. And that's when it occurred to me that we could use rockets to launch satellites into orbits which would broadcast television or anything else to the Earth. And I wrote this up in a paper, a 4 or 5 page paper, and it was published, and that's where it all started. Although this is very speculative, we may be on the verge of tapping a new energy source incomparably greater than anything we've had available before. In fact, it makes atomic energy, nuclear energy, look like nothing. This is so-called zero-point energy, or quantum fluctuations. Space itself, even what we consider empty space, the vacuum of space, is actually a seething mass of energy. The Nobel laureate Richard Feynman once put it very dramatically. He said the energy in a cubic meter of vacuum is enough to boil all the oceans of the Earth. Now, that seems an utterly fantastic statement, but we have in fact detected this energy. It was done in the Philips laboratories by Dr. Casimir a few decades ago. He was able to detect this gigantic energy source in a simple experiment. If we can tap this and use it to run our machines or whatever, or our spacecraft, this would open up the universe, and it would give us an almost infinite source of energy. And that would be the end of the fossil fuel age, the end of uranium, and the nuclear age. It would solve our pollution problems, the carbon dioxide buildup. It would change our world out of all recognition, more than anything, perhaps, since the discovery of fire. One of the reasons why I'm interested in this infinite energy, the phrase cold fusion is rather passé, and it may not be fusion at all, is because if this is for real, and I'm now 95% convinced that it is, this will open up the universe because it would give us essentially weightless power. The problem with rockets, our only means of propulsion in space, is we need gigantic quantities of fuel to carry a tiny payload. But if this infinite energy works, and if, as is possible, it might even provide a method of propulsion, then the universe is going to open up just as the sailing ship opened up the world. You can't beat the laws of thermodynamics. Everything degrades to heat. Where's the heat going to go? Venus, here we come. 500 degrees in the shade. Well, I'm sure there will be a technological solution to that. "2001" was written and appeared at a unique moment in human history. It was released before the first men had landed on the moon, in fact, before the first flight around the moon. And of course, we had to guess what things would be like there. On the whole, we did pretty well, although we had much too jagged lunar landscapes. You know, that was a tradition. And of course, now it's obvious that the moon is pretty well sandblasted, so it's smoother. And it's interesting to notice the things that we got right and the things we got wrong. Who would have dreamed that the Bell system and Pan Am would be no longer with us? But Hilton is still around. Now, the other thing we had to guess was what it would be like on the moons of Jupiter, which were just points of light in the most powerful telescope then. And it wasn't, of course, until the Voyager missions went there that we got close-ups of these fantastic places. And we didn't do too badly even there, I think.
No, you did fairly well. No one could have predicted
Right.
Io. I mean,
No one.
that was just staggering.
After this lapse of time, I can no longer say what ideas were mine and what ideas were standing, with a few exceptions. Some of the basic ideas came from stories of mine, particularly The Sentinel, which is a very short story about the discovery of a fire alarm, if you like, on the moon, set there by some alien race to alert the universe when we've reached the moon. And this is an idea which has been taken quite seriously, and it has been suggested there may be such alarms, perhaps not on the moon, but in the asteroid belt, which you may trigger when we get there. Well, that was my idea. But then we embroidered so many concepts, and, you know, like a table tennis game, we were batting ideas back and forth, and 90% of them were probably bad, and of the 10% that survived, probably half of Stanley's and half mine. When 2001 was released, early in '68, and it's already had its 25th anniversary, which I can't believe. At first, everyone thought it was a disaster. I can remember at the Washington premiere, one of the MGM executives saying, well, that's the end of Stanley Kubrick. And in fact, the first reviews were lukewarm or even critical. And then, of course, the critics went back and saw it again and changed their minds. But there was a slow groundswell. It took a couple of weeks before the message got around, and we realized, you know, probably within a month, that we did have something exceptional on our hands. This is what happens when I switch off my computer.
My mind is going. I can feel it.
Good evening. This is Francesca Sabatini reporting for IBC from the ISA training facilities, where the Newton astronauts are undergoing their final tests for the historic rendezvous with the gigantic extraterrestrial spaceship called Rama. Tonight and for the next 2 nights, I'll focus on the other extraordinary men and women who will represent mankind on this landmark mission. First, among the Newton astronauts are 2 of the world's top research scientists, Dr. David Brown and Dr. Shigeru Takagishi. These men have spent their entire careers trying to understand how life and intelligence developed on Earth, and what that paradigm might mean for the nature of alien life forms.
How many people know where they really came from? Does the public actually understand that the iron, magnesium, and other heavier elements in their body were created in the death throes of stars billions of years ago? Every living thing on Earth owes its existence both to the presence of those heavier elements in the Earth's nebula at the time of its formation and to the remarkable evolutionary process that produced us. When people ask me if I expect to meet aliens that look like little green men, I usually laugh. If we encounter any aliens, they will certainly be far more fantastic than our wildest imaginings. And the chances that they will resemble us in any way are exceedingly remote. In the billions of galaxies in our universe, I believe that chemicals like us have evolved to consciousness on many planets. But only here on planet Earth do we know for certain that those chemicals are aware of themselves and can ask questions about their origin and destiny. To encounter another being at the same or more advanced level of sentience will be the single most important event of human history.
Dr. Brown's research area is chemical evolution, so it's natural for him to view life as nothing more than the gaudy result of chemical reactions. Dr. Takagishi, on the other hand, takes a distinctly anthropological approach to alien life forms.
We are about to interact with a civilization that has existed millions of years longer than we have. Please think about what this means. It doesn't matter, as I have told astronaut Heilman, if the Ramans are friendly or hostile. They are so far ahead of us that any resistance to them will be futile. If their technology can build, launch, and operate an interstellar spaceship the size of our largest cities, how can we presume that our puny capabilities could stop them from doing whatever they choose? Personally, I am completely certain that the Ramans will be friendly.
Doctors Brown and Takagishi, like the rest of the astronaut crew, know full well the heavy responsibility they carry. For IBC, this is Francesca Sabatini at the Newton Training Facility. Good evening, and welcome back to the ISA Astronaut Training Facilities. Tonight, I talk to the 3 career space officers who will travel with the Newton mission when it investigates Rama early next year. Well, the Newton astronauts will carry 2 versions of this uniform up to Rama. One model, which I'm not wearing tonight, will fit over our spacesuits for use in physically hostile environments. The other, this one, will wear inside the Newton and in other benign locations. The most important feature of the uniform and our most important piece of equipment is the ARM computer. Also a communications device, we'll use it to transmit and receive vidmail messages from the other astronauts. And one of those other astronauts is Richard Wakefield. Wakefield is a quintessential systems engineer. He has no peer in the astronaut corps. Richard, can you explain for us non-technological people just what is a systems engineer?
Suppose an engineering team were given the task of designing a human being. Now, undoubtedly, they would employ specialists to create such complex subsystems as the heart, the brain, the liver, etc. But someone would have to ensure that the total person could function, that each of the parts could be integrated and together produce a working human being. That's the systems engineer's job.
Thank you, Richard. We know how busy you are, and we appreciate your taking the time to talk with us. Working with Richard Wakefield...
Excuse me, Francesca, but I believe I have another function on this project, one that may be of even greater importance than my nominal tasks.
And that is?
It's clear we are going to encounter some absolutely mind-boggling technology. Technology that, for all intents and purposes, is indistinguishable from magic. I can't wait to see this engineering magic firsthand and attempt to figure out how it works, what it means, and what it says about the intelligence that created it. Yes, well, that's it, I guess.
Thank you, Richard. Richard's 2 ISA colleagues are both women. Engineering specialist Irina Turgenev and Chief Medical Officer Nicole Desjardins. Yesterday, astronaut Turgenev had just finished testing the new flight rover when I caught up with her. She once said that she was married to the ISA and had no time or desire for any other life.
Sometimes, after a mission, I return home to Kiev to visit my parents. I look around and I wonder if I have missed something important. I have no husband, no children, no life outside the ISA. My work is my life. It has been worth it, though. I have seen the fury of dust storms. I have seen the glory of the Earth rise from the moon and a fiery volcano on Io from a distance of only 10 kilometers. And now I am to be part of the most important mission humans have ever undertaken. I admit I am frightened about what we may find, but I wouldn't trade my position with any other woman in the world.
I've just been informed that Dr. Desjardins is now available to talk to us. Good evening, Nicole. Can you tell us what you've been doing today?
Certainly, Francesca. I've just finished a series of tests on the new robotic surgical equipment that we'll be taking with us on the Newton. As you know, since I'm the only doctor on the crew, computers and robots must be my assistants in any complicated procedure.
Is everything working correctly?
Not yet, but that's normal. We still have several more months to iron out the bugs.
Nicole, are you at all worried about the medical equipment being ready by flight time?
Not at all. My concern, Francesca, is that we may have a major medical emergency while we're exploring Rama. That would obviously present challenges. Due to weight restrictions, we can only carry limited amounts of diagnostic equipment. And while our robotic support is excellent, some of the newest devices haven't been exhaustively field tested.
Do you anticipate excessive levels of stress due to the unusual nature and high profile of this project?
My primary psychological concern has always been using an inexperienced crew on a long-duration mission. Career astronauts like Turgenev and Wakefield are low risk in any kind of space mission. They've performed in similar situations throughout their entire careers. It's the 5 neophytes who worry me.
Well, as one of those neophytes who has been training for over 2 years now, let me ask you what it would take to alleviate your concerns.
Please forgive me, Francesca. It's my duty to worry about the what-ifs. You and Reggie Wilson and the scientists will try to understand and interpret what you find at Rama. My primary task is simpler. Reduce the probability of untoward health events to the lowest possible level. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must...
Of course, Dr. Desjardins. Well, that wraps up our show for tonight. I hope that you'll be back with us tomorrow evening for our final segment on the crew of the Newton. Until then, for IBC, this is Francesca Sabatini. Good evening. This is Francesca Sabatini once again at ISA Training Headquarters. Tonight, I'm joined in our studios by my fellow journalist astronaut on the Newton mission, Reggie Wilson. First, we'll speak with Admiral Otto Heilmann, security chief for the Newton mission, who is currently at his home in Berlin. Then, our guest will be General Michael O'Toole, the military man whose entire career has been spent negotiating peace instead of waging war. Good evening, Admiral Heilmann.
Actually, it is already good morning here in Berlin.
Many people have asked me why we have such a strong military presence on the Newton mission. Are we really worried that Rama represents some kind of a threat?
Francesca, although we haven't seen any hostile or threatening behavior from Rama to date, I believe that its mere existence ought to frighten every human on this planet. Whatever the Raman's intentions, they have technological capabilities far beyond our own. They have built a city-sized spacecraft and dispatched it across the stars. Their military potential is absolutely staggering.
Then you don't agree with Dr. Takagishi's belief that a species so advanced couldn't be hostile?
As a security specialist, I would not need much indication that Rama was hostile to justify destroying it completely.
Thank you for your time, Otto. Reggie and I will see you next week at the Florida Spaceport.
Hello there, General. How are things in sunny Italy?
It wasn't so sunny today, Reggie. In fact, I got a little wet waiting in line at the monument of St. Michael of Siena.
Ciao, General O'Toole. This is Francesca. I just received a report that you spent most of the morning in a private audience with the Pope. Is this true? And if so, what did you and His Holiness talk about?
Most of it wouldn't be of interest to the general public. Fine points of church doctrine. We did discuss some more general religious issues, however. For example, if there are intelligent extraterrestrials, have they too fallen from God's grace? Do they need Jesus or the equivalent to redeem them? And if so, is the Christ paradigm repeated on every world where there's intelligence? And if not, why do some species require redemption and others don't?
It seems natural that these spiritual questions would travel with us in space. Thanks for staying up late to join us, General O'Toole. And thank you, Regman, for stopping by tonight. That completes this brief look at the Newton astronauts. Sometime next year, this group of Earthlings, myself included, will represent our species in the first direct contact with alien intelligence, somewhere inside the extraterrestrial spaceship known as Rama. For IBC, this is Francesca Sabatini. Good night.